The film begins by showing a boy named Jacob Holland who is tossed around in the middle of the ocean after the ship he was on with his family was attacked by a very deadly sea monster. The ship was badly damaged and burned by the flames from the dangerous monster, so all the crew and passengers on the ship sank to the bottom of the sea. As the only person who survived the accident, Jacob tried to survive by holding onto a wooden plank that floated around him. Fortunately, Jacob survived after a pirate ship came to save him, and the pirate captain recruited him as part of the ship's crew. A few years after that, Jacob became a strong and brave young man, joining a group of monster-hunting pirates. That day, as usual, he and the entire crew of the monster hunter ship were stalking the movements of a sea monster named Red Bluster. Jacob works for a pirate captain named Crow, who once saved his life from death, and now he has dedicated his life to becoming the strongest monster hunter. After hunting for days, they finally found Red Bluster, the most powerful sea monster known as the king among other sea monsters. But when the sea hunters were about to get ready to catch Red Bluster, they had to abandon their intention because they had to save another pirate ship being attacked by an octopus sea monster. Then they hurriedly turned their ship's bow and immediately sailed closer to the ship being attacked to help the ship's crew immediately. After the monster hunter ship got close enough to the ship, the giant sea octopus monster instead attacked the monster hunter ship so that Jacob, Captain Crow, and the rest of the monster hunter ship crew had to fight against the giant sea octopus monster. Soon after, Jacob and the others started attacking the monster with the weapons they had prepared and cut off the giant octopus tentacles one by one so their ship could be free from the screeching snares. After Jacob cut off some tentacles and threw a spear at the octopus monster's head, they finally managed to defeat the sea monster and save their ship. However, it turned out that the giant octopus monster could still survive and return to attack the ship, causing Jacob to be thrown away. Captain Crow, who saw Jacob in danger, immediately ordered the crew to shoot the octopus with several arrows. At the same time, with great courage, he jumped from the ship and thrust a spear over the octopus monster's head until it was helpless. Captain Crow then took the horn from the monster to be handed over to the royal members, but one of the tentacles from the octopus monster was still able to catch him. Luckily, Jacob and the rest of the monster hunter crew were still able to save Captain Crow and get him aboard. After the tense battle ended, they decided to finish their hunt for the day and return to the kingdom to hand over their hunts. They decided to take a break and continue hunting for Red Bluster the next day to put up a better fight. Upon their arrival at the kingdom, Jacob and the others began celebrating their success in defeating the sea octopus monster by holding a party at a bar tavern. They were drinking beer and dancing with great enthusiasm, and the party atmosphere at the bar was very lively. While Jacob was resting by the window, a girl named Macy Crumble suddenly sneaked into the bar and asked him to talk. She knows that Jacob is a member of the Monster Hunter group, and she really wants to join him as a member of the Sea Monster Hunter. She explained that her parents had passed away when she was little, and currently, she lives in an orphanage in the middle of town. Macy said she doesn't want to continue to live a boring life like other children at the orphanage, and she wants to go on an adventure to become a sea monster hunter like Jacob. Hearing that, Jacob was amazed by her passion and courage, but he could not allow her to join the Monster Hunter group because Macy was still a child, and the job of a monster hunter was very dangerous. Knowing it was getting dark, Jacob hired a horse carriage to take Macy home to the orphanage. The next morning, Jacob, Captain Crow, and a crewman named Sarah Sharp go to the royal palace to give them the horn of a giant octopus monster. But when they arrived at the palace, the queen and the king were dissatisfied with Captain Crow's hunt and said that he had failed to get Red Bluster. Therefore, the queen said that the royal court would not reward Captain Crow for hunting them, and they would terminate their cooperative alliance with the Monster Hunter group. Soon after, she showed a very magnificent warship that belonged to the royal palace and said that the royal court would carry out Red Bluster's hunt using the combat power of their own troops. Captain Crow, who felt betrayed, became very angry, and there was almost a fight between him and the royal troops. Fortunately, Jacob immediately intervened in their fight and offered a new deal where if the Monster Hunter group caught Red Bluster first, the palace must continue their alliance. But if the royal army managed to catch Red Bluster earlier, the monster hunting group would stop working for the kingdom, and the royal side would no longer need to reward them. Hearing that, the king and the queen agree with it and are willing to give Captain Crow one last chance. On the same day, Captain Crow and his entire crew sailed into the sea and prepared to hunt down the king of monsters, Red Bluster. On the way, they found something wrong with one of the beer barrels they brought, so Jacob tried to open the barrel. And it turns out that the beer barrel had been secretly emptied by Macy because she wanted to sneak into the Monster Hunter ship and join them. Knowing that, Jacob scolded Macy for getting into the ship without permission. But Captain Crow, amazed by her courage, allowed Macy to stay on the ship and asked Sarah to look after her. In the evening, when Jacob and the others reached the middle of the sea, they started throwing fireworks into the sea to lure Red Bluster, and it worked because, within a few moments, Red Bluster started swimming towards their ship. Captain Crow then ordered the ship's crew to throw a spear tied with a rope to pull the sea monster's body. After they succeeded in attacking Red Bluster using spears, they started firing several cannons at him, but the attack was still not strong enough to defeat him. He even counterattacked by creating a giant whirlpool and trying to sink the ship into the whirlpool. Seeing this situation, Jacob realized that their ship could not withstand the onslaught of water that entered their ship, and their ship could be pulled into a whirlpool. Soon after, Jacob asked Captain Crow to release the rope connected to Red Bluster's body because they could all drown in that situation. But Captain Crow rejects his suggestion and thinks they can still beat Red Bluster because the monster is caught in their ship's rope. When the situation became more dangerous, Macy, who accidentally slipped onto the mast and was close to the connecting rope, tried to cut the rope. Captain Crow, who saw what happened, asked Jacob to stop Macy so their Red Bluster hunting mission could continue, but instead, Jacob helped her cut the rope because he didn't want the entire crew to drown. Unfortunately, after Macy and Jacob managed to cut the rope, they both fall into the sea. As a result of that incident, Captain Crow felt very angry and asked Jacob to bring Macy to him so he could teach her a lesson. However, Jacob refused to give Macy, so there was a heated debate between them until Red Bluster suddenly returned and ate the ship they were on. Luckily, they could still survive because it turned out that Red Bluster didn't eat them but took them to an island where the monsters were. When they got there, Jacob again wanted to attack Red Bluster, but Macy, who realized something different from the monster, immediately stopped him. Macy explains that Red Bluster probably didn't intend to eat them both, but he was trying to save them from Captain Crow's wrath. However, Jacob didn't take her words for granted, and he reminded her of the story of the sea monster that had attacked their king and queen several years ago. That night, Jacob and Macy rested in the bowels of a cave and ate some of the fruit they found on the island. The next morning after Macy woke up, she saw a small blue monster that appeared in front of the cave, and she took the initiative to give the monster some food. The little monster immediately ate the food Macy gave with gusto, and she started liking the little monster like a pet. Shortly after, Jacob approached Macy, playing in a monster egg nest, and asked her to leave immediately, but she was still playing with the little monster and told him that she had named the monster Boo. Jacob, worried that the little monster would hurt Macy, immediately grabbed it and threw it into the forest. After that, Jacob carried Macy on his shoulders and started walking carefully through the dozens of monster eggs beneath them. But unfortunately, he accidentally stepped on one of the monster's eggs and made all of the eggs hatch too. Because of that, Jacob and Macy ran towards the beach as fast as possible while the baby monsters started chasing them from behind, thinking that Jacob was their mother. When the mother of the baby monsters suddenly appeared and intended to attack them, they fled using their boat and, luckily, survived. As Jacob starts rowing the canoe and tries to sail away from the monster island, a giant crab monster suddenly appears and attacks them. Luckily, Red Bluster came to save them both and immediately fought the crab monster until it ran scared. Because Red Bluster is the island's strongest sea monster, he can defeat the monster in no time. Seeing the rescue made by Red Bluster, Macy became more convinced that Red Bluster was a good monster and would not hurt them. She even tried communicating with him and asked him to take them back to their home island. Unexpectedly, Red Bluster monster agreed to help them by putting the ship on its back and swimming toward the island. On the other hand, Captain Crow, who realized that Red Bluster was a very powerful monster, decided to see a witch named Gwen Batterby and ask for help defeating Red Bluster monster. Gwen already knew the purpose of Captain Crow's arrival and showed him a poison rifle that she had created. She said that a single shot from the poison machine gun known as the Hands of Gods can incapacitate even the strongest sea monsters. Back to Jacob and Macy, who had traveled quite far, they finally arrived at the royal island where they came from. Upon their arrival on the island's mainland, they had to say their goodbyes to Red Bluster and Boo. Jacob, who already realized that Red Bluster was a good monster, apologized to Red Bluster for everything he had done so far and promised that he would not hunt sea monsters again. But when Red Bluster was about to leave the island, he could feel a threat from the royal troop ship, and he immediately went to the island's center to attack the ship. Soon after, Jacob and Macy try to stop Red Bluster. Unfortunately, he moves too fast, causing Macy to fall and get hurt. After he arrived in the middle of the island, Red Bluster immediately destroyed the troop ship in anger. However, when he saw Macy injured, Red Bluster immediately stopped his attack. Not long after that, Red Bluster sensed a signal from Captain Crow's monster hunter ship, so he rushed to swim toward the ship. Even though previously Red Bluster managed to defeat Captain Crow's troop, this time, they managed to defeat him very easily because of the help of the Hands of God weapon. After successfully paralyzing Red Bluster monster, Captain Crow ordered the entire ship's crew to bind the monster's body to bring it to the royal palace. Meanwhile, Jacob, who realized that Macy had been seriously injured, tried to approach Captain Crow's ship and ask him to help save her. On board Captain Crow's ship, Macy immediately received medical treatment from the surgeon, and now she has regained consciousness. Jacob then went to see Captain Crow and told him that Red Bluster was a very good monster, but he insisted on bringing Red Bluster with him to prove his success in front of the king. When Captain Crow's ship arrived at the palace, all residents seemed enthusiastic about his arrival, and they felt very proud of the success of the monster hunter group in catching Red Bluster. Meanwhile, Macy, who was still locked in the ship's cabin, was rescued by Boo and managed to get out of the room through the window. When Macy saw that Red Bluster had been caught, she tried to help him secretly by cutting the rope that entangled his body. When they arrived in front of the Queen and the King, Captain Crow prepared his spear and intended to kill Red Bluster in front of everyone as proof that he had managed to keep his promise. But Jacob couldn't let Captain Crow kill the sea monster that had saved his life, so Jacob tried to stop him and fight with him. Unfortunately, Captain Crow beat Jacob in the fight until he was thrown under the sea. Meanwhile, Sarah, who already knew that Macy was trying to release Red Bluster, instead helped Macy untie the rope because she realized that the monster had saved Macy. As a result, when Red Bluster managed to escape from the ropes of the ship and regained consciousness from his fainting spell, he began to move and made Captain Crow fall into the sea. The royal troops who saw what happened immediately alerted them with their cannons, while the residents of that place began to panic and fear, thinking that the monster would attack them. Suddenly, Red Bluster, now fully aware, tried to attack Captain Crow, but Macy immediately stopped it. Everyone looked dumbfounded at what had happened. They couldn't believe that a little girl could stop the attack of the strongest sea monster with just one word. Then she tells Red Bluster that they must stop this fight, or it will never end. After that, Jacob shouted in front of everyone and said they should end the monster hunt while breaking the wooden spear that defeated Red Bluster earlier. Red Bluster, who understood his words, returned to their calm attitude and would not attack anyone in that place. Macy then tells everyone they have been lied to by the Queen and the King. They had lied by saying that monsters had attacked their island, even though it was all just propaganda they made, so people hate monsters. Soon after, the King and Queen deliberately sent pirates to hunt monsters because they wanted to benefit from every monster the pirates had hunted to build a more magnificent palace. The Queen, who did not want their crimes to be uncovered, ordered the palace war general to arrest Macy and Jacob, but the general refused and the two criminals immediately hid in the palace. After all that had happened, Jacob and Macy decided to leave the island and start their adventure with Red Bluster on the Monster Island. Meanwhile, Captain Crow and his troops have also decided to stop hunting monsters after learning the truth. Since then, Macy and Jacob have started living on the island of monsters in peace and fighting to protect the monsters on the island. The film ends. The moral message we can learn from this film is never to let ourselves be controlled by hatred and grudges passed down from our predecessors in the past, because that will only create endless fights.